something nice and hot. It's a cold morning. Get some nice hot coffee. Grab a seat. Say hello to a neighbor. See what I did there? Welcome. Welcome to our Lenten series for 2024. You know, very often in this season of Lent, because it's such a time of reflection, repentance, growth towards Easter, we do a lot of inner searching, and we do a lot of inward looking and asking God in our interior lives where we might make some space. And so this season, for our Lenten series, as we gather together in this space, we're going to do something just a little bit different. For the sake of that spiritual growth, as who we are individually and together as the people of God, we're going to look out. We're looking out to see our neighbors. Because we know that Jesus says the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. These two commandments, on these hang all the law and the prophets. This comes in a moment when Jesus is actually speaking to the Sadducees, a people of a different religious sect within Judaism from himself, and they're pushing on him about resurrection. And Jesus is pushing back and teaching, and somebody overhears this conversation and actually likes how Jesus is speaking to the Sadducees, and so says, well, what do you think about the greatest commandment? It's kind of an opening for Jesus. And that's when Jesus says, it comes right out of the Mosaic law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. So this is our primary way of being the people of God. But then, of course, we know in Luke, we have a wonderful story where this time somebody maybe not quite so sure about Jesus, a teacher, a lawyer, someone really well-versed in the scriptures and the law, pushes Jesus or tests Jesus, some of the translations say, and says, okay, this is the primary commandment. I follow this, but how far do I have to go? How do you define neighbor? Is he wanting a pass? Is he seeing if Jesus will trip himself up by who he says the people of God who belong and receive God's love are? And Jesus tells a wonderful story, right, about a man who was a person of Israel. He's in Jerusalem, and he's going to Jericho. And if you could see a map, a quick way to go there would be to pass through the region of Samaria, kind of make a straight shot. But instead, this man goes on a very dangerous outward wilderness road, because there's no way he would go to Samaria. Because the Samaritans are a people of a different culture, a different way of practicing faith, a people in which maybe perhaps amongst them he wouldn't be pure and clean, and he gets down to where he's going. So there's all kinds of reasons he bypasses Samaria and goes out to a very dangerous road where there are bandits and robbers, and sure enough, he's robbed and beaten and left for dead. And as his own people on that same road, bypassing Samaria, pass him, the priestly people, right, the religious leaders, they see him, but for, again, reasons of purity, culture, law, teaching, they keep their distance so as not to be defiled and in some ways not to get involved. Until someone from that very region, Samaria, he was trying to avoid in the first place, comes by and helps him, pays for an inn, makes sure he's bandaged up, gets him the help that he needs. And Jesus says to the man who's pushed on him, which one of these is the neighbor? And much to his chagrin, that teacher says, well, the Samaritan. The least likely, right? The person you'd never expect. And Jesus goes even one step further. Well, you go and act like that Samaritan. That's how you follow God. Loving God and loving our neighbor and having these conversations, Jesus is already at the edges. He's already in conversation, maybe even some debate, some kind of way of engaging people who are different from him on the edges of belief, on the edges of culture, on the edges and margins of vulnerability and boundary and who's in and who's out. And in that place of being on the edges, he continually says, this is how we follow God. This is how we love God in these uncomfortable places, in these places that push us to see the other more like ourselves and ourselves more like the other, so that together we can actually look like the image of God. That is the hard thing that we do. And so this season, we're asking, who is our neighbor? so that we can see our neighbors and see how do we engage our neighbors and how do we avoid our neighbors. Some of the neighbors we'll be hearing from, some of our regular routes and routines tend to go right around some of the neighborhoods, maybe for comfort purposes, maybe for convenience, but there's so many ways that we're not always paying attention to who our neighbors are, and maybe even keeping a distance. So as we learn from our Lazarus ministry about the neighbors all around Alexandria, who we engage week in and week out as they come asking for help, as we learn in the second week from a friend at Casa Chiralagua who lives in relationship and community in a primarily immigrant neighborhood, and as we hear from women who've graduated from the entrepreneurship course through LEDC, our Damascus project, Empowering Women International, about their stories of both struggle and celebration as they've started and expanded businesses in a very challenging situation. In all these ways, we're going to be maybe hearing and seeing people in new ways. And by doing that, we're also practicing what it is to be a neighbor. So when we are in places where these people are going to be super likable, I'm just going to tell you that right now. You're going to love hearing about these neighbors. But there might be a time when someone who doesn't even seem as different from you doesn't feel likable at all. And they're still our neighbor, as we practice seeing and hearing and being generous and hospitable and stepping into spaces that are less comfortable, inviting people into a relationship. We practice what it is so that when we get into those places where it really is hard to love our neighbors, maybe even our family members, friends, our actual neighbors next door, people in community with whom we agree or disagree, we've had some practice of what it is to live and love like Christ. So today we're hearing from Lazarus Ministry. We've got two of our longtime volunteers, Catherine Blair and Dennis Brock, who'll get a bit more down into the specifics with you to highlight these stories of our neighbors. Let me give you just a little bit of an overview, and they'll say much, much more. This is a picture of June Defray, our ministry director. She sends her regrets, just the way our series got developed. She had a previous commitment she could not change this morning. She's going to come back and do a forum with us at some point in much more depth. But she sends her gratitude for this ministry. She loves this work. So Lazarus provides emergency financial assistance to residents of Alexandria. That's the core mission. It's been happening for more than 35 years out of Christ Church in Alexandria and St. Paul's Partnership. Somebody probably has a better date than we all did on this, but about 20 years. And has become really one of our core, key, most impactful, both people impact and financial impact ministries that we do here at St. Paul's. There's one staff position. Everybody else are dedicated volunteers. And in the unprecedented need of recent years since COVID, we're now in relationship with new emergency funding partners since 2023, and those have opened up not only new funds, but opportunities for learning, training, collaboration, having a greater impact because the numbers of requests are higher, but the amount needed to actually address people's realities has gotten bigger too. It might have been at one time, can you help me pay off the last little bit of an electric bill? And now it's, I have a court order and I'm going to get evicted from my home. Right, so huge need. This ministry is supported by St. Paul's parishioners, the Ivacota Foundation, the Washington Forest Foundation, the Dr. Davis Fund, fundraising events, Spring to Action giving, and city grants. And over all these years is always evolving and adapting and very resilient and very creative based on the changing landscape around us and our client needs. Right now, we're doing both in-person assistance. People can make appointments and come and meet with our volunteers here once a week on Tuesday mornings. But there's also, because that can be a challenge for people, there's also ways to get help over the phone. So it's both remote assistance and in-person. So this past year alone, we served over 500 clients. 60% were returning, 40% were brand new to us. 80% need this rental assistance, as I mentioned before. The eviction crisis, the housing crisis is astronomical. Over 40% of our clients are households with children. And here are the zip codes that are primarily served. And I'm going to let Catherine tell you much, much more.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm not used to using a microphone, so, direct me if I need to move it up or down. My name's Catherine Blair. I have been a part of Lazarus Ministry for so long, I can't remember when I started. I think it's about 12 years. I've worked with 3 different directors there, Dorothy Pearson, Laura Simmons, and now June Giuffre. When I joined Lazarus, I was looking for a volunteer opportunity that would allow me to work with directly with the people we were helping. That was very important to me. Serving our neighbor, I wanted to be with our neighbors. And this gives me an opportunity to do that. It also gives me a chance to work together with with other parishioners with a shared mission of serving our community, and it allows me to learn from our parishioners, both from their life experiences and from their experiences with Lazarus, and that has been a gift. So Jenny went into a lot of what Lazarus is. Again, we provide emergency financial assistance to city residents in in 3 different areas: rent, primary utilities, that includes gas, water, electric, and sewer, and medical bills. We also operate a small food pantry for our Tuesday clients that come to see us in person. And for our clients that we work with over the phone, we send them to other food resources. Alive operates a food hub in 2 different locations where they can basically go and use it like a grocery store once a month. And there's other food distribution points throughout the city. And probably, in some ways, more helpful than the financial assistance to some of our clients, we offer a non-judgmental ear. We listen to them. And we offer hope. We offer hope to clients who are under a great deal of stress. So the process, how does a client or a neighbor get to us? Primarily, they enter on their own. They call and leave a message on the St. Paul's. We have a dedicated voicemail line. They have received our name from sometimes word of mouth, but also from landlords, city agencies, and other community partners. Each day, we have a team of volunteers that picks up these messages, and they return the calls and take down some basic information, which they send off to June, our director, to review to see if that particular client is eligible for assistance from us at this time. And if they are, she either assigns them to a Tuesday morning appointment slot, or she assigns them to a volunteer who will work with them over the phone. At that point, volunteers interview their clients. They fill out the paperwork. They gather necessary documentation that allows us to further take a look at and review their need. And we send all that to June, who has the final decision on how we can help and with how much money. June will give us we'll also sometimes pipe in with other ways we can offer help. So other agencies, we could refer them to other thoughts about what they may not have considered. Sometimes they're really living in an apartment they can't afford, so maybe they need to consider taking in a roommate or moving. So these are some conversations that we have with some of our clients. For complicated needs or extensive needs and emergency needs, June has set up a very strong partnership with community agencies, and they have a weekly meeting, and we'll discuss some individual clients that are in like immediate threat of eviction, and we'll try to put together packages that will help these clients. And finally, once we know how we're helping, the volunteer will call the client back and let them know how we're helping. So we have several eligibility clients for our eligibility requirement for our neighbors who call. They must live within the incorporated city of Alexandria. So that means that they are, we range from Old Town all the way to the West End, but we don't serve our neighbors that are in the Alexandria part of Fairfax, just the city. They must not have received financial assistance with us in the past 4 months. They must be seeking assistance with one of the bills expenses we do help with. And they must be willing to provide us with the necessary documentation and information that we need to evaluate their request. Finally, to ensure that we are thoughtful stewards of our available funding, which is important because it's, we try to be generous, but it is limited. We consider whether the gift we hope to give them, combined with the gifts from potential gifts from other agencies, will help them move forward. And to do that, we have to consider the total size of the client's outstanding balance, because oftentimes they'll request $300 because they think that's what we may give them, but we need to know exactly how much they really owe. And we also need to understand what their household income situation is, if they're receiving services from government agencies, if they have a job, if they are starting a job soon, that kind of stuff. So I've been through several evolutions of Lazarus. When I first started, we only saw clients on Tuesday mornings. We filled out everything on paper. We stored everything in a whole slew of filing cabinets back in the back of Norton. Some of those are still there. We had an administrator who did some additional work throughout the week, but the primary support came on Tuesday mornings. Our client requests were the outstanding balance was much smaller, as Jenny mentioned. Sometimes, the maximum we would see maybe $2,500. Our gifts averaged probably at that time $125 to $150 at the most. And the funding primarily came through the St. Paul's budget, Alive, and parishioner donations. With COVID came a lot of changes, and we had to switch to a remote model, which was new for all of us. It required some training, and it encouraged us to digitize our documentation. So we took a big initiative to do that. We were fielding 25 to 50 calls a day, and we couldn't possibly return them all in one day. So we just had to keep a running list of people that needed help and went one by one as best we could. We helped a lot of people, and what was sort of a part-time job became a full-time job for many of us. We saw the requests that were, no more than $2,500 were starting at $3,000 up to $10,000 and more, which is very difficult for any of our community agencies to provide. Fortunately, we were able to get some government funding through ACT and some of the grants that Jenny mentioned above, and the incredible generosity from our parish and parishioners to help us meet a lot of need in our city at that time. We also that's when we really began working in a more coordinated way with our community partners. Currently, we are under a hybrid model. So we see people on Tuesday mornings, and we also see people, talk to people over the phone. Tuesday mornings allow people that have an immediate need to come in and walk away knowing how much help they are getting. When we work over the phone, it gives volunteers that we were now able to recruit that couldn't come on Tuesday mornings. They can now help because they can, call clients when they get home from work or during lunch or whatever. So that's been great. It's increased our volunteer pool. We're continuing to work on ways to improve our use of technology to streamline our client data collection and retention. And we're exploring additional ways to work with the city and other emergency providers to more effectively and efficiently coordinate assistance for our neighbors most at risk of eviction. I've learned a lot since I've been involved with Lazarus. First of all, financial hardship can fall upon any of us, no matter our current level of financial security, and it can happen faster than you would ever imagine. It calls to mind a family that came to see me years ago, a mom and a dad and their toddler. They also had a baby at home. They were both very successful in their fields. They had a large bank account, a ton of savings. The family then just started to experience a tremendous series of unfortunate events. A bad investment wiped out their savings. One of the parents was erroneously charged and arrested, and their legal bills to clear the charge were huge. Both parents were diagnosed with cancer and had to go undergo treatment, and their medical insurance was, not adequate. So they really were struggling. And their gratefulness and the fact that we would sit there and listen to their story really meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to us too, actually. Faith that God will provide blesses not only our neighbors who harbor that faith, but it also blesses those who spend time with them. So many of our clients are managing the same challenges that we manage, but in addition to that, they're doing it with limited income, if any income, and that just creates an enormous amount of stress. However, they react with grace. They believe that God will provide, and they leave here thankful that God is providing. And for us, that renews our faith. Our financial counseling and assistance are a welcoming gift to our neighbors who have come here from other countries. It gives them hope that they will find the opportunities and community and security they're seeking for themselves and their families. I was working one Christmas, right before Christmas actually, with a Spanish-speaking woman. We were trying to communicate. I have elementary school Spanish, and I'd forgotten most of that. And a man who was there to translate for another family heard me and said, "May I help?" So he started to translate. The woman needed to step away for a few minutes, and at that time, this kind man started to cry. And he looked at me and said, "I am so thankful for everything that you all do for us, for what you have done for my family in the past, and what you do for our community. We come here to America for opportunities, and we work so hard to give our children a better life. And while my life is still difficult, I can see that my children's lives are getting better, and that their children's lives will be even better than that. And for that, we are very grateful." That was a huge Christmas present for me. Finally, gratitude knows no bounds. We receive heartfelt thanks and equal levels of thanks for the smallest $50 payment for an electric bill to a $1,500 rent check. We get thank you notes, we get phone calls, we have clients that check in with us to let us know how they're doing, to let them know that they've gotten a job or are going back to school. I mean, that is just incredible feedback. I received this year several Happy New Year's, Merry Christmas text messages with funny memes. I even the other day got one that said Happy Valentine's Day. So, it's just really nice to have these clients come to us and remember us, because we sure remember them. They are our neighbors, and we share our lives with them, and that's a gift. So now I'll turn this over to Dennis, who has some more stories to tell.
Very good. Thank you. I have a few about some of our clients and what we do. But first I want to say that I'm just forever thinking of when I think about all the service that we're doing for Lazarus, that I'm just so thankful, blessed, lucky that I was born the son of Rex and Edith Brock in Great Bend, Kansas, and had all the opportunities that I've had and that these people didn't have. And it's just one of the things that is something that Lazarus has brought back to me, not that it didn't, but anyway. As Catherine said, we go through this long list, and it's June and Melody and myself, of all these phone numbers, and sometimes it's just phone number and a first or last name, and you have to kind of make sense of it. You have to call, and you never say, "Is so-and-so there?" because they think you're a bill collector. You have to just introduce you. I'm Dennis from St. Paul's Church, and then maybe they'll call back, maybe they won't, and then the second time you call, you can usually get somebody on the phone. Because they're screening all the calls, because they've got so many people that are trying to get their money and things. But so let me tell you some stories. The first one I've got is a success story from Ahmad. Ahmad was a vice president of a bank in Afghanistan. He got enough, he got his wife and child out, and before our exit, he didn't get out, and finally he got out, and they were living in the seminary towers. Now, we have a lot of clients. That's what we call our callers, clients, and they were living in Seminary Towers, or Southern Towers off of Seminary Road. And so he was behind on his rent. Ahmad came here without a license, without anything. Got his driver's license, borrowed a car, he started driving for Uber, but he could do better, and I thought so too. So one morning, we met at the Lyceum at on Pendleton and Washington Street. They got those big columns. This was before they opened. And I photographed him with the columns in the background, and we designed a page for Indeed. And he looked like he was running for Congress. He really looked terrific. I don't know if he got a job, but he did get a job as a dispatcher for a trucking company. And I checked in with him, and he's doing real well. Now, Maurice Moore is not doing well. Maurice is, as Catherine said, we don't help people on a monthly basis. We can't do that. It's 4 months every time. But Maurice has called over the years, and I've talked to him many times. But Maurice has a sciatic pain, and he'll get a job, and then this thing will be so bad he can't work, gets fired. And you're talking to him, and then I'm talking about the cures for this, and then he's a little older, and so the changes and things like that. I realized I'm spending a lot of time with this guy, and then I realized that he needs this. This is about the only call he's going to get, the only person he can talk to. So we do a lot of that, as Catherine says. This week I had a call from Gary. Gary, he's a day laborer, works for cash, I'm sure. He fell, and all he needed was $100 for rent. Well, this is the place to come for that, and there's no other place for it. And so each one is different. The whole thing is about knowing your neighbors. Now, Lisa is a person I don't think I'd ever meet. Another place that we have a lot of clients for is the Fields of Alexandria. Now, we mentioned the documentation. We need what we call, and for no better word, a ledger. Now, a ledger is what you really owe, and that's the last thing. We need this. But some of the people that we deal with, getting that is just beyond them. So you have to do it yourself. So you talk to the rental offices, and sometimes they're cooperative, sometimes they're not. And I'm talking to Lisa, and she hears our dogs barking, and we start talking about dogs. Well, I send her a picture of our dogs, and she sends a picture of her dogs. And every time I need something from the Fields of Alexandria, I ask for Lisa, and that's about it. So you do get to know your neighbors. Every time when we come in, and I see a African American, about 50 to 60 years old, my first question is, do you know Rush Lucas? Now, Rush Lucas knows everybody. He's lived over on Payne Street, and he's worked for everybody in the world, and everybody knows Rush. And chances are the person will say, yeah, Rush, I went to school with him, but they all went to T.C. Williams. Or I work with him, and it breaks the ice. You've got to have something that people will be relaxed with when they come in. Begging for money, asking for money, is to their frame of mind is sort of begging. And they come in, and a lot of our clients, they sit down and they talk real low, and you have to kind of get them up and kind of reach out to them. And sometimes it's just about, have you tried the coffee? Or explain, well, we used to have rolls, but we don't have anymore. I'm really sorry about that. and then they kind of open up at things. So each one is different. Amos came up, and he says, I'm a tea drinker. And I went in, and St. Liliana fixed him a cup of tea, and that was it. That was fine. Now, Robert, this is during COVID. This is a little different. He had his ledger, but he had no way of getting it to us, no internet. And he says, you know, so I'll just go and tack it to your front door. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I'm thinking first of Martin Luther, and then I'm thinking of Orrin. He wouldn't like that. So anyway, so I says, no, I'm getting in my car right now. I'll meet you at the church. Sure enough, there was an old red pickup truck waiting on the corner, a double park there. And he handed me his invoice, and he's a great guy. He knew Rush too, as a matter of fact. But the last one, and I was always laughing when I think of Sterling. Sterling is the security guard that couldn't shoot straight. He couldn't shoot at all. He'd never seen a pistol, really, except in pictures. But security guards, armed security guards, make more than unarmed. Well, Sterling was an unarmed guy, and I talked to him when I screened the calls and things, and I'd say just fun. We just had a lot of fun, and so he came in, and he's a well-dressed man, and we were talking about, and he was talking about his attempt, and he says, I went through the first day of this test, and then we got to the firing range. And he says, I'm in my little booth, and here's this pistol over here, here's these bullets over here, and this cartridge, and I'm thinking, well, I put the things, and I'm getting it, and all the rest of the people in this class are going, and this instructor comes and looks at him, points, says, out the door. So that was the end of that. Well, while I'm talking to him, I noticed that he had this great baritone voice. It was just beautiful. I said, you know, you could be an announcer. And most towns don't need announcers. This town uses announcers because we have all these associations and little minor presentations. And there's always the guy behind the curtain who has this thing and says, and the baritone voice, it says, and here is CEO John Smith. You never see this guy. We call him the voice of God. So anyway, he could do this. And this brings up something that I think about is we could do more, not for everybody, but we can do more for some. And really, with such a creative crowd, we should do more. That's about my stories, but one thing I want to say is that maybe we've helped people, but I know that working with Lazarus has helped me just as much as we've helped people. And now I think other people want to say something.
June calls the folks who help this happen day in and day out our team of angels. If you're one of the Lazarus angels, would you mind standing? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd stand up, we want to thank you. If you're here, some of our folks are here. Thank you. And we will have just a couple minutes for questions, but I know at least Bob wanted to say a little bit of something from your time as well, and maybe others too.
Thank you. Yeah, I started Lazarus a little bit after Catherine, maybe 11 years now. And it is, without question, the most humbling experience I have had in quite a long time. You would not believe the level of